most of them. And they give them names. Penelope. Susanna was my daughter's doll. Pollyanna, I don't know. Little girls love to play with dolls, and that's a good thing. It's something inbuilt. I remember my daughter when she was about 2. It was Christmas Day, and she got this pram, little kid's pram. And she knew what to do with it. She knew that dolls go in it. She didn't have a doll yet. And she's opening this other present, and it's a doll. And she's 2. And she is desperate to get the wrapping off and get it out of the box so she can pick it up and put it in the pram. And just this sort of desperate little girl just can't wait to do this. And when she gets into this sigh of relief, you know, it's a 2-year-old. No one taught her that. It's inbuilt. It's just there. The day comes when little girls grow up and they put away, you know, the fun times and the happiness of playing with little dolls, and they set aside that happiness for the bigger joy and the greater joy of having their own children. Or looking after someone else's children. Maybe in the creche ministry. Or maybe even helping other children, maybe in faraway places, children who are very sick in faraway places. Or children who don't have a mum and a dad to care for them. You have a ministry to real babies, showing the love of God in very, very practical ways. You get a holy ambition. You grow up, you get a holy ambition. Little boys. I remember what it was like to be a little boy. I was average. If I had a ball, truck, and a toy gun, I was happy. That's what little boys are into. Now, I never owned a real gun. If you grow up in the country, you might own a gun. You might think, you know, I grew up in the city, you have to have a gun. But no, I never owned a real gun. But I did, and I remember very well fighting against the forces of evil, and I rescued prisoners, and I shot a lot of bad guys with my toy guns. And I loved playing ball games, first and almost every day in the backyard, playing soccer and cricket and tennis and league, and we played tackle and almost killed each other. And started in the backyard, and then we graduated to the real field and the real court, playing in competition. And I loved digging roads for my truck. My old infant school, Georges Hall Primary School, when I was in infants, part of the playground was sand, okay, but it was bricky sand, which was really hard. And you could dig in it, and you could carve roads, and you could make tunnels, and they would stay intact, and you could drive your trucks around it, and then when the bell went, you get all the loose sand and cover it all back up, and no one else could find it. Loved playing with trucks. It was fun. And it's good for little boys to play games, to play ball games, and to play with toy guns and toy cars and trucks. But someday, little boys and bigger boys, hopefully, will grow up. And the difference between a little boy Christian and a grown-up Christian young man is you get a holy ambition and you put away childish things. And that means that the good, fun things of being a little boy growing up with, you know, things like toys and balls and trucks, the joy of those things gets smaller and smaller and smaller and gives way to the greater joy of things, you know, like wielding the sword of the Spirit and shooting the gospel gun, or driving a truckload of Christian love to those who are needy and kicking sand in the devil's face. All those things start to become vastly more enjoyable than little trucks and little bats and balls and little guns as you move from being a child to being an adult, from being a baby Christian to being a mature Christian. Well, you get a holy ambition. Paul puts it this way, 1 Corinthians 10:31, he says, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it to the glory of God. It doesn't matter if it's eating, it doesn't matter if it's drinking, it doesn't matter if it's whatever. Whatever career choice, whatever vocational path, that is secondary. The all-important thing, the primary thing, the number one thing is that you find something to do for the glory of God. You make that your holy ambition. That is the way not to waste your life. You say, what does it mean to do all to the glory of God? It means that you do it in a way that honours God. You do it in a way that it makes God look very, very good. Okay, He is a very good God. But most people don't see that. Most people there on the street, when they think about God, they don't think about how good He is. I'm not sure what sort of idea they get in their head or where they get it from. But it's not usually about how great and glorious God is. And so therefore, what it means for us to do everything to the glory of God is that we need to do everything in such a way that reflects very, very well on God. And it draws people's attention to Him. And people sit up and take notice of, boy, He must be a good God for this person to act in this way. It's very important we give a right impression about God. You know, when our kids go out on a school excursion, our school, your school, doesn't matter. Your teachers probably put it upon you, so you know when you go out, you've got to behave yourself when you're out there. People are watching you because you're giving an impression about your school. And people will form an impression about your school by the way that you behave. It's exactly the same with God. People form impressions about our God by the way that they see you live. But when you do that well, when you do things in a way that reflect well on God, that's what it means to live well, and that's what it means to not waste your life. Paul helps us to understand this a little bit in Philippians chapter 1. Just let's go over there, please. Philippians chapter 1. Philippians 1 verse 20. He says, according to my expectation and my hope, that in nothing shall I be ashamed, but that with all boldness, as always, so now also Christ shall be magnified in my body, whether it be by life or by death. He says, I want to live in such a way as to not be ashamed of my life. I don't want to be ashamed of anything that I do. I want to live my life in such a way that doesn't reflect badly on God and make me embarrassed or cause God to be dishonoured. I don't want to waste my life, not for a day. He says, I want my life to count. How do I do that? He said, magnifying Christ. It's how to make your life count. Magnify Christ. What does that mean? How do you do that? You know, often we think of magnification, we think of a microscope. And with a microscope, what you do is you put something very, very small under it. And you look and it seems so much bigger than it really is. You can't do that with God. God is not very, very small. Our job isn't to make Him seem bigger than He is. Our God is so very, very big we can't take Him all in. And so for us it's more like a telescope. He's so big out there, we're just trying to take it all in, bring it down to a narrow focus so our little bitty brain can begin to comprehend it. And that's what we ought to be doing. Our lives should be such as we're carrying around this telescope saying, look through here and see what my God is really like. Let me show you, let me tell you what my God's really like. And you do that in whatever vocation God calls you into. Whatever you do, what you do is secondary. The way you do it to the glory of God, that's the primary thing. Colossians 3, let me read you a couple of verses there. It says, servants, that's employees. Obey in all things your masters according to the flesh, not with eye service as men pleasers, but in singleness of heart, fearing God, and whatsoever you do, whatever you do. It's not the main thing here. Whatever you do, Do it heartily as unto the Lord and not unto men, knowing that of the Lord ye shall receive the reward of the inheritance, for ye serve the Lord Christ. Whatever you do, that's secondary. But you do it as unto the Lord. You do it for the glory of God. And that's one way not to waste your life. Some of you grew up in Christian homes, and maybe your old-fashioned parents had one of those old-fashioned plaques somewhere in the house, and it said, it looked old-fashioned, but it's a timeless message. It says, only one life will soon be passed, and only what's done for Christ will last. I think about that old man who got saved late in life, and his tears were not tears of joy for his salvation, but tears of regret because he wasted his life. And I contrast that with one of my friends, Tony Lee Chu, who at the age of 19 was killed on his motorbike in Sydney as part of our youth group. And he died very young. But to tell you what, his young life was not wasted. There was no young man I knew as godly as Tony Lee Chu. He was, I think, a year younger than me when he died. And he was a wonderful example. And though he was younger than me, I certainly looked up to him. And when his funeral was conducted up at Inverell, because that's where he came from, there were a lot of us that travelled from Sydney. And a lot of people from the local Inverell community whose lives had been greatly touched by this young man. And there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people at his funeral because he had in some way impacted their lives. People who make a difference are not people who've mastered a lot of things. At the age of 19, you can't master a lot of things. But Tony was someone who had been mastered by one or two things that were very great. It's not your intelligence, it's not your looks, it's not your family background. Okay? It's not your family background. It's not your genes. It's knowing a few very great things about how great God is. And that's why anyone in this room can make a difference. Because it's not you, it's what grips you. It's that holy ambition that takes hold of you. And you determine that you're going to do everything, whatever, you're going to do it for the glory of God. So young people, don't waste your life. Whatever you do, whatever God gives you to do, you do it to the glory of God. Let's pray. Gracious Lord, we thank you again for the instruction for young people. Lord, thank you for this group of young people here who have the opportunity at a young age to sort out some things that some older people haven't realized yet. And many older people never will. And consequently, their lives will be just a waste. But Lord, I thank you that for the young people there is opportunity. There is the scriptures. There is divine wisdom. There is divine guidance. We're told how to not have a wasted life. So, Lord, I do pray that this would be the beginning for some of these young people. That they'd be able to take some of these thoughts, they would remain with them. And in all of their thinking, in all of their planning, and all their pondering about the future, all of their training for whatever vocation, pray that they would do all that, but with an eye to this. How can I glorify God in this? How can I do the most important thing in this? How can I magnify God and see for myself the wonderful God that you are and show others the same? Lord, I pray that you might grant the young people this blessing. May this be their daily motivation. Gives them meaning and purpose. When some aspects perhaps of their job gets a bit mundane or